Now, at the end of the 19th century, as you all know, in Ireland, throughout the global Irish scattering, there comes a new phase in Irish cultural history, the attempted revival of the language. Here are a couple of examples from Victoria. So before I take it, that, here's a quote from the newspaper. A class was formed at St Patrick's Hall in Melbourne in the latter end of the 1870s by the late Mr Edwards, I can't find Mr Edwards yet, a pupil of the famous John O'Donovan. The textbooks were O'Donovan's, as printed by the Society for the Preservation of the Irish Language. The class was lasted for a short time and then dissolved. That's a very interesting link to a particularly important group in the revival, SPIL. A key figure in the Gaelic League in Victoria is Nicholas O'Donnell. He corresponded with Douglas Hyde. I've written a couple of articles that have been published in the last 12 months about him, which you can follow. One in the Australian Journal of Irish Studies and one in the volume from the New Zealand Conference. But this man is a medical doctor, a home ruler, founded the Gaelic League. He wrote a column called the Gaelic Column in the Advocate, and he left his library. He thought it was a state library, but it ended up at Newman College, which I'll come back to that in a minute. I just want to show you a couple of the ripples of the Gaelic revival. This is a gravestone of Kathleen Dempsey, Mavourneen, time and place at distance, just the top line, the bottom line, Kay Mueller Fulcher, once again here. Also in the Porphyry grave where Dempsey is buried is the grave of Andras Londrach, Fear a day or that's 1912, that's absolutely rare in Victorian graveyards. The full use of the Irish language, and obviously someone who was following developments. There are ripples in poems and in art. A church in East Melbourne, St John's East Melbourne, the only one actually, but it makes great use of a round tower and other features of Gaelic revival. But how's this for a tableau at the Loretto Convent, Ballarat, in 1905? I had to go and look up some bigger, but I suppose those of you who've been reading the novels better than I know that it's the Credo by Melvin Bragg is about some bigger. So there's a girls' school in country Victoria doing their bit in the Gaelic revival. I want to jump along now. 20 years later, the Gaelic League was founded, collapsed in 1905. But in 1920 you get a revival. The branch was named the Terence McSweeney branch, under the leadership of James O'Dwyer, Pontius McKellen, and others, including Arthur Cornwall, who came, as you know, within one seat of being Prime Minister of this country. Arthur's future wife, Elizabeth Marin, Irish born, was a teacher of Irish and an activist with the Gaelic League. The picture you have there is of the grave of John McSweeney, the father of Terence, who was buried in Melbourne, and this group, the Gaelic League, erected a memorial to Terence and John on the grave at the Melbourne General Cemetery. It's a unique monument in Victoria and I think in Australia. You've got the general thing that on the left is the view of the grave, on the right is the inscription for Sherlock McSweeney, Terence McSweeney, the home scribe and mayor of Port, officer of the Irish Army, and died on home scribe in Brixton prison, as it says on the bottom, on the 25th of October 1920. Look, that grave has been used down through the years. That's a 1953 commemoration at the grave. We're reading the 1916 proclamation. One of the founders of that group, the Gaelic League, I just have to show you this. This person, Frank McKeown, was arrested along the drive when I was in Sydney by Billy Hughes because they were suspected of supporting the Irish Republican Brotherhood. But his grave has a most unusual phrase, Kuru Inyavan A, so Glenn Nadeg. He was in bondage, he was put in prison by Billy Hughes. But one other grave in Australia has Kuru Inyavan A on it. I want to mention to you another remarkable figure that's cropped up, Tom Culhane. born in Limerick, but he had a degree in college studies from Queen's University Belfast. Worked as a clerk, basically, in Australia, but wrote articles, and he wrote regularly back to historical journals in Ireland. And when the book on the history of Glynn was written, McGahn says it really should have been written by Tom Culhane, who kept sending us all the stuff. One of Culhane's friends, who I don't have a picture of, was Jim Quinn. I just want to mention him. Jim Quinn is known as the man who discovered the Ardagh chalice. He had a very special place in the folk memory of Victorians who have kept alive the interest in Gaelic culture. Quinn's story, he discovered the Ardagh chalice, that's true, came to Australia, worked on the railways, died penniless, and is in an unmarked grave in Faulkner. But it's a reminder of how many of the Irish immigrants to Victoria were employed on the railways and public works, and the man who found the Ardagh chalice is one of them. With 1945 we get a new situation. In 1953, Miles Dillon, the great scholar of Irish, toured Australia, and it corresponds to a bit of an attempt to get classes going. That's a little magazine called The Gaelic Link. They took lessons around. You can learn about how Australian English was pronounced at the time. You can also learn how Australian Irish was pronounced by looking at some of those. So, law, I've for your Ogden. Okay. Before you get to 2008, between 1953 and 2008, there was a marked revival of interest during the 1970s and 1980s, corresponding with the troubles in Ireland. And I've done oral history interviews with those involved, and the people going into the language issue of those years are aware and were aware that it heightened their sense of Irish awareness, of their Irish identity, but also the movement for migrant rights of the 1980s opened up a window with permission for Italian and Greek to be used on Australian radio. It became possible to use Irish and Scots Gaelic, which is what happened with SBS and the ethnic radio station. That's a slide from the 2008 summer school of an organisation formed in the 1990s called Cumann Glover Hostra, the Irish Language Association of Australia. Eamon Norton and Mossy Scanlon, two native speakers, have played a key role in that, along with Joan Maloney. But there are perhaps 6 people in Victoria who are Australian born and fluent in Irish, and they've also played a part in getting that going. There's been a big change in the last couple of years. For the first time, there's books in Irish about Australian relatives. Cork-born poet Louis de Puer was here for 9 years, put up in collections of poems. That's a picture of the Kensington railway line. When was there a book before in Irish with the Kensington railway station? And the one on the right, of course, is Mossy Scanlon's book of 2009, Mum, he asked about growing up in Cork-Lee and then migrating to England and then to Australia. Well, both those authors, by the way, have suggested the major challenge facing all those issues in Gaelic culture in Australia is the dialogue with Indigenous people. If Gaelic languages are in trouble in Australia, then the Indigenous language, not the Kulin people, are in even bigger trouble. One of the main arguments about the enduring effect of Gaelic in Australia concerns the impact on Australian English of Gaelic languages, and I have some take-home homework for you to look at and reply to in an email. So, to conclude, on the positive side, some words, stories, obviously the songs and the poems that Grant spoke about earlier, survive the journey across the globe. And that is in a way surprising, with so much that there are people like myself whose ancestors came 150 years ago who can be so interested. Is a bit of a surprise, I think, to many of the cultural observers in this country. Nevertheless, those efforts have been marked by a dramatic lack of continuity. Each of the revival groups I've given you a glimpse of ignored in their founding documents any previous groups. Leading individuals I've interviewed them of one generation did not know the leading activists of the preceding one. So that's my scale. It's survived, but it's a bit of a shipwreck. Thank you.
Neil, I think that's that. Thank you very much, Val. Does anyone have a question for Val before we move to our third speaker? Yes? Any questions?
Well,
Yes.
what do you see as perhaps the next trend? Where do you think we're going with this? Is there going to be more interest or has it peaked?
Oh, that's a perfect setup for Elking. The way of the future is there, it's the past. Sorry, that's a big one joke. Elking is about to speak about the business. Hey, can't take that to Harvard. Hey, come here, please. Serious. Absolutely.